Hi, it's Pete the Bumbling Modeler back with another build. It's running concurrent to the Type 42 destroyer I'm doing at the moment, so I'll just slip this one in. But this is the Airfix 135th Ferret Scout car. You can see that, and then you can say that. The reason I'm doing it really is I was going to save this for later on in the year, but this is July 2026, and all over the internet at the moment there seems to be people talking about Airfix being a failed company, Airfix that, and they're just hypothesizing what's going on without any real knowledge as far as I can see. They're just putting two and two together and making six. A bit of an Airfix devotee, as in I was born in the mid-60s, and when I was growing up, you either built Airfix kits, you built Matchbox kits, or you played football. So I built Airfix kits. So it's Airfix who got me into the hobby. So it'd be good to show some sort of support, because no matter what happens within the management of Airfix or Hornby, they make good kits. I can't think of a new release they've released lately that's bad. There's this, there's the Katie Ambulance, there's the Gannet, there's the I can't remember. There's a lot of good kits there. So that bit over and done with. I'll get the lid out of the way so we don't get the glare, and we'll get glare off the polythene bag, so I'll get that out of the way. I have opened it to have a bit of a peek at it when I arrived. Let's get the instructions out there. Quite a big instruction sheet actually, as in physically large, not a lot to do. So we'll get these bits out carefully, and I say carefully because when this arrived, through no fault of Airfix's, it looked like someone had jumped on the box and you just saw it fall out there. Let's get rid of the polythene bag. This little lump of plastic was lying in the bottom of the bag, and I think it's just a bit of sprue. I'm going to put that out of the way there so I remember where it is, and then I'll put that on that shelf so I remember where it is if needed. Save that as an important part of the kit. I know where it is, so we can do that. Move that to the back of the bench. And the first thing I want to do is get the wheels glued together, because there's a seam around the middle of them there where the two halves go together, and that'll need sanding down. And as per usual for me, I'll want to get that all settled in before I sand it back, so I don't get any ghost seams coming later on. Even though there's the spare wheel is a different number, these are all identical, so we'll just snip these off. So let's just check how these go. There's a couple of locating pins. Well, as usual, I'll drop things. That's the first thing I've dropped of the day. I don't ever need to get rid of the attachment point at this moment. They'll have to go. I'm going to go quiet now. I'm just cutting off these little attachment points. I'll probably leave the camera running and edit this out later on. Okay, it seems to be a little bit of a nib on some of these wheels. I'll get a needle file and we'll just... I don't really want to take off the location pins, but that sort of thing, it's just slightly higher, so it's just holding it. See little bits. So let's go carefully through those. That's why I didn't sit as flat as I'd like on that first. Not going hard on it, just gently teasing those bits out, although that may sit a little bit nicer. yeah, just doing that's made a seamless join there. So just get your flat file and just hit the surfaces. And a file rather than a sanding stick, because a file will only take the high points off. It won't dig into the plastic and take chunks out of it in the same way that what he's doing. Same way that a sanding stick will. These are far gentler. Oops. This one flattened off. It only seems to be one out of the 4, so a quarter of them, I suppose, if you look at that. Yeah, that one's gone together well enough. And that's flat, so it's just that one that had the problem, which is a bit odd. But there you go. And because I don't mind these oozing out a bit, I've got another contact here open. I normally have 2 tubes of this on the go, and one's normally the... Oh, there it is on the bench. Let's see if this one's flowing any better than that. It's just the tube's a bit blocked. Tube's blocked on both of them. That's annoying. Yeah, that's unblocked. I like these applicators, but they are prone to blockage. So I want to make sure I don't get any glue where I don't want it, so I've got to be a bit careful on this. So that might be quite handy just to balance it. I'm normally a fan of all Tamiya products, but for actual when I want a glue with a bit of bulk behind it rather than just the extra thin, I tend to use this Revel contactor rather than the Tamiya white top. It's a resin based glue and it's thicker, and what we want on this is a slow drying time and plenty of oozage to fill any gaps. So I'm just gonna, I don't mind if it bubbles out provided I don't get fingerprints in it. The more you put on, and it's quite thin here because it's hot today, the more you put on the greater chance you have of distorting, but you'll have loads of working time on this. Now let's get that together. So I don't mind what I do, providing I don't get gluey fingerprints on the face of the tyre. So I line all that up. That's one done. Actually, this might be a better way of doing it. Just while I'm putting it on in case it hits my finger. The fact that will all ooze out the sides is what we're looking for. So fingerprints around the outside edge don't matter because we're going to do that. I just don't want them in the middle, so let's get them out of the way. Not sure I'll need those bulldog clips. Actually, I might just say, okay, we're going to have a problem with this and leave it at that. Again, rushing, not following my own technique. Just put that on there to hold it so I'm not holding it and the glue doesn't run over my fingers by capillary action. The first dog hair of the day has just got into the that'll be alright then. Got a glue fingerprint where I said I didn't want one, but that is actually clamping together quite well, so we get the clips on that now. You may have saved that one, especially when part of the wheel is going to be on the ground, so we can hide anything that's got a slight gap in it, and it's black, so it won't show as much wrong attitude, but when I weather them it would. So they're done. Then we'll get the spare wheel done quickly, then we can relax a little bit because we now got them set in and ready to go. Everything else on the kit is just put together with it extra thin by the look of it. I've had a brief glance at the instructions, so you don't have anything that's, well, I don't think you've got anything that's two halves. I think it's just flat plates going together. Fit that to make sure it's all right. Yeah, it's flat as a pancake, so that's okay. Same thing. This wheel on the model I'm going to do is going to be a bit more hidden. I just wanted to get this done like lightning to get us going, and then we'll worry about the actual model I'm doing in a minute. Bit of a squeeze, but they're together. Wheels all done. Right, I can relax and slow the pace a bit now. So somewhere in here's the decals, don't want to lose those. Here's the decals, let's get them out of the way. Look at the options you can build. I'm going for this one. Partly because it's got no gun, which I quite like. And also I like the red. It just stands out a bit as opposed to the normal sort of bronze green. Is it? Yeah, it's a bronze green colour you normally get. So that's why I was saying I wasn't too worried about the spare wheel getting a mark on it, because you've got that red cover saying 25, but that just looks a more colourful model to me. So that's option B, and when you're going through the instructions, areas like this, you've got a different radio in option B than A and C. The fact that you wouldn't necessarily see that doesn't really matter, it's so deep inside it, but it's a more modern radio, and you've got other areas of where it's got a different call out. I think there's these panels down the side somewhere when I had a glance. Yeah, so you need that stowage bin rather than the other one later on, so just be aware that whatever you're doing, you need to same with the smoke discharges, the A, B and the C. Okay, you can have it capped or uncapped, sorry, so I'll have the cap one, so you just have to be a little bit aware. Right, I'm going to start cutting stuff off the sprue, and then when we've got a heap of cleaned up parts, we'll see how things start to go together. Hiya, so I was just looking at these hatches here. You can either have them open or closed, so closed, you just drop them in and those little pins locate like the hinges on the inside. I'm going to have them open, which apparently you just glue them horizontally to the back of this deck here. The reason I put them together now was to find out how they fitted, see if I had to do anything. There was a little bit of a fit issue, nothing major, but oops, I've still got some grot on the hatches there. These will be painted later because it appears, although the internals are silver, these appear to be all over bronze green, which makes sense because you want bright and shining silver on the outside of your vehicle at all if you're trying to go for concealment. But by the by. But I think what the trouble was if you look around now, that slight gap, that is because you've got a 90-degree corner and a 90-degree corner there, and it's just too much for it to cope with. So if you just go with a file and bevel the back edge that you're never going to see. I see a bit of sprue. Sorry, I think I went a bit off camera then. So yeah, just this back edge here, just put a nice 45-degree bevel. You're not going to see that, but it just means that can slide right up into that corner there, and that gap becomes a scale gap, because there will be a gap there, but it's not. You just touch a bit of extra thin down there, and because of capillary action running around, you don't want your fingers in there, just get your tweezers, then hog it into the rest and leave it well alone, and they'll be fine. So that's the only slight foible I've found. What have I dropped this time? Is that the lid off my glue? Probably. Right, anyway, I'm going to get all these bits cleaned up and then we'll see how they go together. I've raced ahead in the bits I'm cleaning because obviously these sides sit on the hull, and this engine deck controls the gap at the back, so you want to make sure that everything fit. Even though I'm not fitting this right away, I just want to make sure I use it as a jig to hold everything together. So I'll be back when I've got everything cleaned up. It won't take me that long. Okay, so big chunks of kit are now cleaned up. These drive shafts, be careful with the ejector pins, not ejector pins, the sprue mounts there. You can't see them, so you can be quite cavalier about cleaning them up, but this piece locates here, and it's incredibly close to the sides of the main hull when it goes on, so if you have anything sticking out there, you're likely to run into a problem later on. But this is all just, the sides will go on in bits and pieces, but the main thing about this was getting bits cleaned up, so when I put the sides on I can just check everything lines up. But judging by the way the hull fits against the side plates and the rear engine bulkhead, I don't think there's any way it won't line up, but we'll see. So they've got two little location tabs there, make sure they're locked in, and it locks in here, but I know it's underneath something, so I'm not too worried. I think all the internal is silver, so I can get away with assembling a lot, just spraying over silver. But things like the front clutches plate, got a steering wheel which is a different colour, the hatch will be a different colour, so I'll put all that on later on. I'm just trying to, the seats I'll be silver framed but with a red brown sort of leathery pad, so I'm hoping I can drop those in later on once it's all done. But everything else seems just to click into place. So that's your rear bulkhead, so nothing beyond that point will be seen. And I'm gluing it from the outside just to keep it relatively mess free on the inside, because it's I haven't quite cleaned that Got a feeling those fractions of a millimetre will prove key, because the hull links onto those sides, so if you've got an angle there, that'll translate into a mismatch later on. So that's alright, we're done again now. Re-glue that. Don't think that can go any other way. And your whole sides link up with those little tabs there. So I won't do what I normally do, and I'll make sure I've got the front. So that's how your hole sits down in there, and there's no gap on the bottom. It is a really nice fit. But before we do that, I'll put in the mount for the radio, because I think that's going to be silver as well. The radio itself won't be, but yeah, XF56, everything's that silvery colour. I've got the alternative one. There doesn't seem to be any location for these as such. That's the side you can see, so we'll just make sure that's doubly tidy if I can find that file. Or is that just the full width of the vehicle? I think it's just the full width of the vehicle, so you don't need location. Just put a little dab in there. This seems to be one of these kits that, if you want to practice painting armour, it goes together quite quick, so you won't get bored assembling it. Then you've got loads of time to play around with painting it. So they're saying put the seats in now. I'm pretty sure you'll have access later on for that. Yeah, you've got bags of room to do that. So what I'm going to do on this, I've got a bit there I haven't quite cleaned off yet. And what we'll do here is we'll just put a little blob of glue in that area. That area to make the plastic a bit tacky. Then we'll chuck our hull on and push it down into those. Then I can hit this area here. And slowly go around the outside, bonding it together so that area there needs to break glue. See, that's sprung open already. If it does fit well, you just have to be a bit careful, and that's why I wanted to put on the various engine decks and things. So let's get this. Same with this side. I'm really lay it on these back ones actually, because they're not ever going to be seen. Front ones we want a bit more subtlety. What is nice, the ejector pin marks, see that underneath that seat and things, they're all hidden. So that's not that I was going to worry too much about that, because you can see so little inside this thing. So that front, I've got the front plates all cut off so we can hold it together with them, but I was thinking if I can get this up to a reasonable point there, then run some glue down that face there to hold it together. And this back deck, where's that grill go? Suspect the grill would be that's interesting. The grill's on the outside. There is a positive location, but this fella goes on first. And again, I don't think I'm going to have any trouble painting this with this in place, so it will hold everything. Together in quite a nice way. You would have thought there'd be some location on that actually, but there's not. That's not going to be enough to set it, just enough to make it sticky. So this is kind of by eye, which is a little bit disappointing. And then any gap you've got down the side there, of course. I mean, hit with a bit of... I'll use a Vallejo fillet I've bought for the Type 42 Destroyer if anyone's watching that. So let's just... And that's sort of designed for stuff like that filler. It's just because it wipes off so easily. I'm getting bits of gap there, but the gaps that I'm not getting any on the bottom of the hull, which is nice. And they're gaps I can adjust out later on. Then we know where this is going to drop now because we've got positive location for that. The downside is being a hull built out of sections rather than a bathtub hull is everything has to line up. The positive side is it reduces the cost doing it this way. And it's nothing that you shouldn't be able to deal with as a modeler. So initially, start the ball rolling by getting a bit down there. That should tack that in place a little bit. And we should be able to manipulate that round to minimise that gap. I tend to work off camera a lot, sorry. We just run a little bits down there, a little bit down there, give that a gentle squeeze, that should hold that together. Got no gaps at the back, that's quite decent around that area. A moderate amount of filler to smear in. I wish I'd got that flat before it went together actually. Oops. Then if we're right, this should drop in, and there's no sides of that yet, but this front plate, if we get it right, will... Where do you go? Or are you the back plate? You're not the... Oh, you're the back plate. The wrong bit off. Yes, you're the back plate, so you can go in now. because there's nothing we're painting in that. I might squirt some black paint in there through the grills, but I don't think it needs it. So you can squidge up a bit, get it all snug there. It was a mistake not taking that ejector pin mark off now, but I can carefully file that. So we've got a little gap there, which is next to nothing to worry about, but we'll just wang a bit of glue there, a bit more glue there. It's been running for 15 minutes already, blimey. Minor clampage on the back there, that's the only bit that needs clamping, and that might be me leaving a pin mark in there, but I'll just clamp that one up, make sure nothing moves while I'm doing it. Ooh. Sorry. Yeah, stupidity there. So yeah, it does benefit from a little bit of a clamp just in that joint there, but that's that. Once that's set, that'll do. So I'm not going to do any more for this now, with the potential exception of what plate goes on the front. I just want to check the gaps right in the front. Oh, is it all of that? No, it can't be, can it? Is it? Okay, so that fits there as well, so don't need to do anything with that yet. These can sit on the bench till they're cleaned up later on. Don't need that yet, so we're just going to leave this to harden up. Then we can hit the inside of that with some primer. Then can I see a gap there? Two clumps. Hit it with some primer, give it a coat of silver paint, and then put the seats in. But it doesn't need much more than that, because I say the windows into this are so small. You'd be hard pressed to see anything. Oops. So I'll rush this, and this is why this isn't an Airfix problem. This is me rushing to get this done and the box off my bench, to be honest. So we know that's there. I'll carry on cleaning up bits, but it looks like the main hull will be together quite quickly. So it's just the seats and the radiator paint and drop in. The front of this needs to be painted silver at the same time. There's a couple of ejector pin marks there, which I don't think we're going to see. I'll have to check on that. If you can see them through the hatch, we'll deal with them. Then I'll give it a black wash, which should be really over the top, but it will highlight some detail, or what little detail there is. And then external fittings and bins then, I suppose. So let's call that a day for now, and then we'll be back later on with a with the hull, rest of the hull going together. But so far it's just falling together, everything locates. There isn't location pins as such, but it does seem to self-locate on everything. So I'll leave you to it and I'll be back soon. Okay, everything's progressing on this, everything's joined up, those gaps have gone. The only thing I don't like is this grill on the back. It's just too heavy. When you look at photos of the real one, that's a bit of thin metal grid, and I've tried thinning out on this side with a degree of success, but it's never going to look perfect. So what I'm thinking now is, can I make a grill out of thin sheet styrene and drop it in that gap, and I definitely think it's worth a try. You can buy a resin aftermarket bit to drop in that, but it comes with other stuff, and it's 20 something pounds, and I didn't pay that for the whole kit. So for that, I have to live with what I've got and carry on trying to carve that out, but getting these intermediate bits thin is near impossible, or try this grid. And I think if I'm bold and try this grid, it should work out okay. It'll look better because it's a lot thinner. So all I've done, I'll show you on this bit of scrap styrene here, is I've cut some strip, drilled a hole in 2 corresponding pieces, and then keep making these grills till the right, to be honest. If this doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. So you get your 2 pieces there with a hole drilled in, which is the diameter of the thickness. You get your scalpel, which I can't find. Scalpel. And just snick that little bit out. Of both of them. And they just slot together like that. So that's how I've made that grill. Then I run a bit of styrene cement down it, and then I've got to get the gap about right, I think. There's another bit there. So yeah, I think I'm going to work on that. I can't really show it on camera because my head's getting in the way, so I'll switch this off a bit and I'll see if I can get any closer to it. Okay, so back to the ferret, and we're almost ready to paint the interior, so we can get the rest of the bodywork on. So it's going to be painted, well, it's going to be primed black, then painted a metallic silver colour. All these were an aluminium paint inside. I'm probably going to use MRP steel because that's quite a dark aluminium-y colour. But before I did that, I really wasn't happy with the back grill on this. You'll see if I've got any photos of it from an earlier stage of the build. I might be able to zoom in so you can see what I mean. But this is quite an open grill on the back of a ferret, and there's sort of some horrible little slots. So initially I made a new grill out of plastic hard. It was never going to be perfect. It was always going to be a bit shonky, but it was better than what was on the kit in my eyes. You can buy a resin replacement for there. I don't know if I already said this. I do these things a little bit out of sequence, sorry, but that's 22 quid, which is as much as I paid for the kit, but you do get other bits in it like fire extinguishers and tools, but I'm not too worried about that. So paying £22 just for that rear grille was a bit of a nightmare, and I wasn't prepared to do it. So because I'd made a grill, I had to cut the old grill off, and I thought, well, if I'm cutting the old grill off, I might as well try and make those slots a little bit bigger and see what it looks like, because the kit part is always going to look better. If you look at it, it's sloped several different angles, so it's always going to look better than anything I can do. And it was surprisingly easy. I started off with a scalpel and just widen the slots till I could get a needle file. Then I got a small needle file in there. I just gently worked away at those areas till I had a thin rib. So I left the back as was and moved forward, so I thinned this side of it and then this side of it, then tried to make these ones a little bit thinner, and it works surprisingly well. You have to be careful, you have to take your time, and these little bits sometimes break loose when you're filing. When that happens, all you can do is glue them back on and walk away, let it harden up for a few hours, then come back to it. It's delicate, and it took me probably an hour and a half, 2 hours to get that done. I'll tidy it all up with a coat of liquid poly to melt any fuzz off it. But while I was doing it, I did get carried away on this middle rib and snap that off. So rather than faff about trying to join it, I got my calipers out, I measured that gap, and it's 5mm exactly. So I've got a thin bit of plastic card, it's 1/2 mil thick, and I tapered it so I didn't cut it 5mm because then it'll drop straight through and you have to find a way of clamping it. So it's about 5.5mm at the top, about 4.5 at the bottom, so I can just wedge that in without worrying about clamps. Sorry, just got interrupted then. So line that all up as best you can. Remember, we're not after perfection, we're after it looking better. So well oversized, but once it's done, I can follow that line up here and just trim it off with side cutters and tidy it up with a file. So that's all lined up. Suppose you could replace every element with this so it would line up as well. Just cut them out bar by bar, but I think that'd be too long-winded. Just get the extra thin on that so it joins up. It's probably not going to be perfect. The gaps all look parallel, so wang a bit more of that in. And now it's the hard bit, being patient and leaving that. I don't want to touch that now till, I would say, for 24 hours, that glue to fully cure. Then we'll come in with side cutters, trim it a little bit oversized, try and get that angle on, and then just get a needle file and follow the angle of that grill up until we've got that blended in. And then we've got the rear grill looking a lot more like a rear grill than it was. In reality, I think there's probably another level to this, that between here and here is unnaturally thick. I think on the real one they've probably got 3 rows, or this back row is this back plate, but it looks like a grill on a Ferret armour car. So get that trimmed off tomorrow. Squirt a load of matte black paint in there so you can't see anything through it, because now we've made that grill bigger, of course, it's more see-through. This will be primed in black, metallic silver, put a wash on it, then pop the radios in, seats in, and then we're ready to move on and get the rest of the hull together. And again, the inside of this will be the same, the black and silver, and I'll probably spray all these before I put them on. It's ejector pin marks. I don't know if you're going to see them. I'm going to have a hatch open on this, so it may be they are visible. I want to get as much light in as you can. There's not a lot of internal detail, but that doesn't mean I don't want to show off what's there. Oh, I'm not sure what's there, so we'll just... That'll do. Just with a wash goes on that, you'll see circles. Down there I'm not too bothered about, because this bit sits somewhere like that. So yeah, the chances of seeing anything are quite remote. because there's another structure around here. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there for the back of that to dry. Then we'll come back and do a bit more on that in a couple of days. And I'm thinking if I can get that sprayed, I'll put the wash on. I'll spray it off camera, put the wash on camera, get it all sprayed up. We can get the rest of the body done in the next sitting. So let's leave it there and I'll be back soon. Okay, so back onto the little Ferret Scout car. So it's been probably the best part of 24 hours, and that little bit of plastic I've put in has dried. So now I've trimmed it back where it's really sticking up with these cutters as much as I can, get a little bit more off. So now it's just a case of that file. The file I normally use is a flat file, not that one. Where did I put that? Sorry, my usual disorganized self. There we go. So it's just going to be a case of blending that into the rest of the engine deck. And that was me Windows protection telling me I've got to do something else. I don't know. Things always bleeping. So it's just, you want it flush with these sides here. And I am just, as per, making this up as I go along, but that seems to be working. Trying to do it without damaging other bits of plastic, which is something I tend to do. I don't know if you can see, but that's sort of blended in, I think, as well as it's going to get. Just take that sharp ridge off it. So there's plenty of photos of the back decks of ferrets on the internet, but I don't know, they're all someone else's work. Someone's taken that photo, so I don't know what I can put up off the internet to show you what I can't. So I would suggest, if you want to see what that should look like, have a quick Google of Mark II ferret walk around or something, and you'll see that deck. It's normally got 3 rows of grills rather than 2, but I think that's it's done this way because of the thickness of the plastic. If they moved it that way, it'd look unnatural. If they left it where it is, the holes are right length, but the you haven't got accurate grills because obviously they're going to be a lot thinner in real life. But in a minute I'll put up a photo of this and a photo of what it was originally like, and I'm not saying it's perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's better than it was. And standoff, it looks like a grill rather than a lump of plastic with irregular shaped holes in it. So relatively happy. So the next thing I'm going to do, and I'll do it off camera again because of the noise, is give all the inside of this and the inside of these panels a squirt of black paint. Normally I would prime then paint, and when I do the outer body I'll certainly be priming and painting, but the inside's never going to get it's hardly going to get seen, let alone touched, so the paint isn't going to rub off. And in the sake of economy, if I give that a coat of black and hose around the inside of this as well, so when you look in it's light fast, then it's ready for the silver enamel paint that you get on the real armoured car. So I just want to get that done tonight so I can carry on. The radios I'm going to paint a different colour so they can stay to one side. The hatch lids, only made those to see how they fitted, but they seem to be a green colour on the full-size vehicle, which makes sense because when you got them open you don't want light reflecting off it. It's only the insides there that are black. So seats will get a coat of that base black before they get, I was going to paint them a red brown colour, but everything seems to be like a black plastic on the full size ones, so I'll paint them a sort of rubber black and then give them a quick dry brush with some German grey. Again, how much of that I'll see, but what you don't do is normally a bit you see. So these hatches and the seat needs a coat of black, so I'll do that and show you it quickly, then I'll switch off for tonight and do the silver painting tomorrow. Okay, so that was quick squirt over with LP5 satin black, the Tamiya colour. As I say, the outside of this I will prime because you want something for the paint to really cling to. You want it to be quite hard wearing, whereas this is never going to get touched inside. LP5 is just because I've got a lot of, it's a semi-gloss black and I've got a lot of it around, so you could either do a matte black or a satin for what I'm doing, but a gloss black would be too shiny and slippy when it's done. If I'm honest, it was just something for the underlying paint, the overlying paint to grip onto. So this, because it's a lacquer relating to plastic anyway, if I was using an acrylic paint I probably would prime it, because when you try and dry brush things or move things around, you'll probably find you'll chip the paint off. But this will give it a good key to start with, so it's as good as a primer in some respects. So the other reason for black is when I spray this, the aluminium colour, if I miss any areas in the corners or anything, it'll look like a shadow, it won't look like bare plastic. So that'll just, any sort of mist spray will actually improve the look of it rather than degrade from it. And while I was doing it, I just hosed a load of black in the back there, so when you're looking through them grills you're not seeing any green. Obviously it's going to be overlaid with a green paint, a primer and a green paint anyway, so that'll be grey then green. So where the green gets in, fine. Where it doesn't, you'll just see black. But now that bit I've put in has had a coat of black paint, hopefully you can see it blends in. When it was white it stood out like a sore thumb, but now it's been painted black, it fits in with the rest of the grills quite well in my eye. So it's never going to be perfect, it's never going to be as good as a resin one you could buy, but the resin one you can buy, as I say, is 20 quid, and that was a fraction of a penny in scrap styrene sheets. So I think that for a casual model where I've got no real affinity to this, and I probably won't even keep it, I just didn't want to spend the money. I mean, improve the looks of it, I will, but I want to improve the looks at zero extra cost, because as I say, I've got another kit being built alongside this, which will be up on the channel soon, and I'd rather spend the money on the other kit because that's part of a group build where a lot of people are going to see it, whereas this is only going to be us. But anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Then tomorrow we'll give it a coat of the aluminium so you can get the overall effect, get the seats in, get the radios in, and then we can put all the panels on, and then we can start putting the external mud guards and storage bins on, and it'll start to come together relatively quickly then, I think. Looking at the instructions before we paint the outside, there's a lot to put on there because you want plastic to plastic contact on a lot of this. So it'll probably be fully built with the suspension on, because that would have been painted bronze green as well, I guess. So yeah, fully built up to the point where the wheels go on, and the wheels will be painted off the kit, the rest of it will go on. The tools may or may not be painted on the kit, it depends how good they are, but yeah, I think once this part of the superstructure's on and the front plates on it with the steering wheel on there, it's going to go together in about 10 minutes of video time. I won't show every bit, I'll just highlight any bits where I've struggled to figure out what was going on. So hi, back onto the little Ferret armoured car, scout car, we want to call it. So I was glancing through the instructions and I nearly made a bit of a mistake there. I read this as you put that big rack on there if you're having the older radios, and the smaller rack if you're having the modern radios. And it was me misreading the instructions, I sort of leapt ahead a little bit. The rack for the modern radios is a two-piece thing, so you put on this piece here which we've put in, which I assumed was for the, you see that, this little rack here, which I assumed was for the modern radios, and then you put this little piece on top of it with the radios on it. So just be a little bit aware of that. These modern radios just sit flat on that bulkhead or step or whatever it is, so nothing major, but it's worth catching in time, because it can just, I will probably end up gluing the radios to this and lowering the whole lot in, doesn't matter. So the whole, sorry, a bit of indigestion there, the whole interior components have had this coat of silver, which ended up with MRP geranium. I was going to use steel, but I've used that. It doesn't really matter what it is, it's a silver colour is what you want, because these things are painted with an aluminium paint inside. Oh yes, I forgot to glue a lot of I forgots. It shows there's no artificial intelligence in this. There's barely any intelligence at all. There's a little stub there that fits onto this front plate where the steering wheel mounts, so we'll glue that on now. I keep saying it really irritates me. I've left a bit of the sprue on that because I wanted it bigger so I wouldn't lose it overnight. So I can put that in, glue it on, then snip that bit of sprue off when it's in place, because you're not going to see the underside of that ever. So although it'll leave a little blemish on it, it's not something you'll see. So all I'm going to do is ram that flood there to dissolve all the paint away. Find my tweezers because I'm unprepared and didn't have them ready. Just drop that in. Ooh, and then drop it in and miss, then do it again. The long stub is the for the steering wheel. The short little stubby bit goes into the model, so chuck that in there. Good squeeze down. And I'll pour a bit more of this on it. My computer was annoyingly upgrading this morning, so you'll hear a lot of these blips and blops in the background. Sorry about that. I really wanted to get started half an hour before, but it wouldn't start till it had done something. Yeah, how these things go. On the angle this sits on the front, it's so far down you're not going to see into the bottom of that from that narrow hatch at the top. So although you've got other components that are going to poke through here, you'll never see those. So the next thing really is to do a bit of dry brushing. So well, this Abteilung light grey, it doesn't matter what it just want a bit of contrast. And I've started on one radio, so if you look at one radio and then the other, you can see hopefully straight away that the dry brushing has brought out the detail on that. That one I did with the residue that's left on the brush, so this might come on a bit strong on this one. And these dry brushes are using are these Army Painter ones. They're specially designed to be dry brushes, and for years I was cutting down paint brushes and I was getting streaky effects or scratching paint. These proved to be ideal, so they're not, it was, I think it was about 15 quid for a pack of 3 and you only use a small one, but definitely worth it. So just go around these edges just to highlight stuff. That's a little bit stronger than on this one. I'll find top surface. I thought all the greys picked up the texture of the paint on this. Oh, by the way, yes, those were painted. What was it? It was a Tamiya black green. I thought I'd left the paint out to show you. Hang on. Screaming at me. But that isn't a black. That's a Tamiya black green. And I like to mix up the black. So that's actually a very, very, very dark green. Because there's rubber black in other parts of it, like the tyres, I like to sort of mix the blacks up a bit, and you don't notice it as such, but you do notice there's a subtle shift to it, so it's not in your face, different colours, but it is different shades of black all the way through the model. So that's what I've done with that. I'll have to find that, because I think I need to buy a new jar of it anyway. But look for Tamiya rubber black if you want to shift different black shades. I use black green. I use black green and rubber black and a German grey sometimes a tinted German grey, but I never use black as such on an armour model. So just highlight that. These are so deep inside the van, you need to make it like a pantomime makeup thing. And again, there's something wrong there because the two radio sets in there look different. These are identical, but that doesn't really bother us. Seats have all been painted rubber black, but I've used this AK marker pen. Sorry AK, but I was a bit snobby. I always sort of thought that AK were just rebranding other people's things. So I was always a bit, I'm not using them no matter what, but when they make something and release it, even if it is someone else's stuff, it's good. And for a job like this where I wanted to keep the aluminium coloured seat frame, then go around it, saves mucking about with fine paint brushes. You can keep a steady line because you've got a continuous flow of paint. You can just stroke down alongside that, whereas if you've got a paintbrush, you have to keep on dipping into paint. It's a pain. So for quick interior jobs, these AK markers are pretty good. And to be honest, although I swore I'd never use them, I've now got, you know, all varying colours, a couple of different aluminiums, wood stain, all sorts. So yeah, my snobby not using you attitude hasn't really worked out, but there you go, we all learn as we go. So while I've got the dry brush out, I'm just going to get the edge of the seats and try and give them a bit of definition, so when you look through the top, they're not just a black, albeit rubber black slab. So you can get, I think I'm probably going to build this kit again. This was a sort of build alongside the main build, and it's often the case of me, the secondary build takes over and becomes the main build because I'm really enjoying it. So I was looking at it and I want to build this one out of the box just as it is, but now there's quite a few optional extras like weighted wheel tires and that back grille tools and some photo etch for the brackets available. So I think what I'll do is buy bits and pieces when they become available, and build a more detailed version of it to see what they look like next to each other. So that'll probably be 8 months down the line. This is July. I'll probably do that in the new year. Get myself another one of these over Christmas because there's bound to be a sale on. And yeah, start building up the bits and pieces I need to make a more detailed one, because I've found some decals in Hannants where it's the same as the training vehicle we're doing here, but instead of a red panel, it's all bright yellow panel, so I think it'd be quite nice to have the contrast. So that's moving forward. Anyway, we've got seats dry brushed, we've got the steering wheel dry brushed, and we have to remember on this it's upside down, so the steering wheel, the dry brush face needs to go that way. I don't know if it's a coincidence, but the way Airfix have done it with that silver panel, it looks like it's got the retaining nut holding it on. Actually, I put that on the wrong way saying that. But anyway, the dry brush face to the outside. So the next thing we need to do is, again, I think pretty unnecessary because you're not seeing much, but just put little pin wash in places just in case you can see anything later on. So there's details around these catches, and I wouldn't normally go this dark with the wash, if I'm honest. Hopefully you don't see anything on the top there, because if you do, you'll see the ejector pins that I didn't quite remove properly. It's just to give it a bit of pizzazz if it's needed. So around there, tops these escape hatches. It'll run down to the bottom, so we don't need to worry about that. I'm not worried about the slight blobbiness of it, because I just don't think you're going to see anything in there. But that being said, let's just try and ease that little blobbage there. That's it. If you can get anything in that panel, I will. The chance of any of that being seen is remote, but we've done our best. So that's the wash side of things done. Yeah, we're just going to try and give a bit more life to these radios as well. So, which is the bottom. No real reference to this, but there's always a red button on things to switch them off and on. So I'll get a little blob of red paint and is touching that. It's not that noticeable, but it just adds to breaking up the interior. Same one on this one. We'll assume same radio. So a bit of red there. That's all the red we need. There will be some red on the hatches, actually on the levers and the handles, so that will come in again. And then back to me pens. We've got an aluminium pen there. And we'll assume that is a big knurled knob, so the paint will worn off, and that'll be aluminium. Same on that. Yeah, you can see what's going on. And we'll assume that is because it's some sort of button or knob. And those four, so it's just added a bit more interest to it, really brought it alive. I have looked online at photos, and there are sort of dull aluminium bits as well as the odd red button on it. I'm not sure where they are, wasn't looking too closely, and As I say, we know that that's wrong because the two radios are paired radios, but they look slightly different. There's two different models that go in there. One, I think, is to talk to other troops, and one is to talk to the armoured vehicles. So the fact it's inaccurate means we can just slap the odd bit of colour onto that for giggles and it'll be okay. So I'm going to switch off now. I'll glue the radios onto the radio rack, glue the radio rack in, chuck the seats in there, glue the steering wheel on, and then we can start assembling the rest of that hull. So back in a second. Okay, so that's the inside, as good as assembled. So you're not seeing a lot in there. If you imagine with the hatch, then the turret's smaller again, you're just getting a bit of the flavour, but hopefully by me moving that around you can see how everything's gone and how the dry brushing's just helped the edges of those seats, the top faces of the radios, and those little bits of colour we put in just catch your eye. So putting these sides on is relatively simple and you get a good join, but there is, I don't know whether that's that little nib there. I don't know if you can see it. I'll try and zoom in when we do it. Or should I try and move close to the camera? No. Will it focus? You'll see. There's a sort of little nib there. That's out of focus, so we'll scrap that. Right, we won't move in. We'll stay here. And I'll cut out that blurry bit so the thing will have jumped. There's a little nib here. I don't know whether that's meant to be a location to fit against that there, or whether it's a bit of sprue gate. I'm going to assume sprue gate because it seems to hold it off a bit. So I'm just getting my file and gently getting rid of that, because we can do it by eye anyway, even if that is a location point. It's not a necessary one. I'll look back after the footage later on and see if that is a tab. I suspect it is meant to be a location for this. And the other thing about these is, don't put them inside, don't knock your glue over. It's because I'm doing it on camera. These poke in inboard a long way. I couldn't figure that out. I was trying to join them up like that, but yeah, they do go in, pointing towards the vehicle quite a way. So all you have to do is line up. And all you have to do is throw it on your bench, is line up things as best you can, and then run a bit of extra thin down it, then potentially walk away. But I think we'll put the front plate on where everything's soft, just to make sure it does line up. That's drying too quick. I'll probably need a bit of filler down this side, but that was me being a bit vigorous, and I've got that water-based filler which will show you how to do it. A bit of oozage is alright as long as I don't touch it, because that will shrink back. It'll be easier to fill that little gap than try and adjust it. This side's fitted perfectly, so I'll just put a bit more glue where we need it. I think about 2 or 3 minutes to set up, and no more than that. I'll pause the recording at this point. Oh, that steering wheel's a slight wonk. That's all right. Right, we should be depaused now. So that was literally just a minute or two to let that go tacky. It's not solid on that because I might want to manipulate it to get this front plate on, or I've got it wrong, peel it off. There's a slight step there and there. Now I don't know whether the turret's going to hide that. I'll have to look at the instructions, or we'll have to file it flat, but it'd be easy to run a file down here just to blend all that in rather than jiggle it around. We've got quite a good joint down the sides and across this area, which is the bit that'd be harder to correct, so I'm not too worried about that. Then this front plate in theory should drop in. That's why I wanted to leave those a little bit soft, because I want to squeeze them out to match the front plate. And it's a matter of picking the areas you think you can fill the easiest. So I'm not too worried about a gap down there and there because that's a relatively flat surface. So I want to get this nice. So that'll be harder to fill. Pull that out a little bit. I don't know if it's best to put this front plate on first or second. It's a tricky one. We'll just give this a little touch here on the bottom half so don't get me, doesn't run up to my fingers. And then we'll have to hold that and drink tea while it sets. They are welded on plates, so there is a bit of a step on it. So the step's not the problem. Judging by that, yeah, it's a weld all the way down there. So again, when I make the other one, I might try putting little weld seams on these so it looks a bit more weldy than not. But I'm just going to hold that tightish. And then once that's in place, we can give it another run of glue. Good try, I've got some on the top now, so I can't grab the top if I have to. But I was going to put a weld seam in, I'd gouge it out and put a bit of putty in rather than just put it on the top. So that's looking okay there. So gaps down the front we can sort out later. But for now, run a bit of, and the ones down the side look like they'll be covered by the fenders anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. So it's this front one where there's a really obvious step in the plate anyway. Oh, I'm looking at the box and pointing, you can't see that. If you look at the box, these ones down the side are step but quite tight, which we've got. We've got this seam along the front, so it doesn't matter how well it is because it's got an overhang on it. And up the side here, you're going to be covered by the mud guards. So as long as it's not misaligned so the mud guards don't fit, it's not going to be a huge problem. So I think we're at a point where we can leave this well alone for half a day and let all that glue set. Any ooze down there we can file off later on. And yeah, from the driver's hatch you can see the steering wheel and the seat and the radios when you're looking through, so the radios are a worthwhile thing. From the top you can't see anything inside there, so you don't need pedals or anything. The fact it's silver is all you need to see. So yeah, it's a limited inside, but the inside works. And these hatches we'll use as masks when we spray the whole thing, so we'll pop these on. Pop them on now so I don't lose them. Pop them on before we spray it so we don't get paint inside it. Then whip them off and spray them. The insides of them, the bronze green when we come to do it. But yeah, there's no obvious impossible to fill gaps. Everything seems to be aligned. So steering wheel's slightly wonky, but no one's ever going to notice that. So we'll call that a day on this one for now. Okay, so sorry, it's a bit of an abrupt start, isn't it? I'll start that again. Okay then, so we've let this glue set up for an hour or two and it's all pretty solid now. I say there were steps around there. There's still a slight step, so I've just been going over and gently buffing that away until I get a flat surface. The step isn't going to be as such that the turret's going to sit at an angle, but we don't want those gaps either. Just changing the angles as I go, so I'm just doing it until that slightly shiny line disappears, or disappears as much as it's going to. There's a bit of a mark there, but you're not going to see that. Let's get all the dust out of it. So we've done that. Then there's a little turret ring that fits on top of that. I'm not going to spray that silver on the inside. It should be, but when you look at it, you can't. Any angle you look at, you just see a shadow. That'll get worse with the turret on. Now this, fitted but didn't fit, if that makes sense. So what had happened was, because all these are individual plates glued on, they don't quite line up. So I've just spent 10 or 15 minutes with the file, just where's me needle? There you go. Just easing away those interfaces and feeling where it feels like it's touching until that drops in nicely with a minimum of gap. And in fact, now it's dropped in nicely with a minimum of gap. If I don't do this now, I'll keep playing around and mucking about with it and make it worse. So what we'll do is just tack that in now, because that's, I don't think I'm going against anything with the instructions by putting that in now. I think it'll still work because the turret drops on top of that. So just seal all that in. And the other version of this is the older version that hasn't got the turrets, so you just end up with that top, but I'd still flatten that off if I was doing it so I didn't have any steps in it. So there's a slight ridge and a step there, but will you see that? Probably. No, my look. That'll be alright. If I need to, I can put a bit of filler in that. So we'll leave that to set. Now the turret itself is now posing a bit of a problem, because on the internal faces there's these little pads which are, I believe, painted black. So we'll be doing rubber black or black green. So really I'm going to have to spray the inner faces of this so I can paint those little crash pads in the right colour. It's only on these 3 parts, but I might as well paint the whole inner faces of it bronze green. So priming bronze green, then assemble it, then I can touch up the paint where the glue's gone through. To do that, I'm having to rely on the fact that I expect all these to fit perfectly, because there'll be no room for adjustment afterwards, but I don't think there's any way on earth I'll be able to get in there and paint those neatly, even with those pens, once it's assembled, because it's tipping down at an angle. Oops, put a tat on that. So it means I've kind of ground to a halt today. I can paint that. Oh, sorry, I keep working off camera. It's a terrible habit. Get that deeper head. I can paint that, let the bronze green settle down, paint that black, then assemble it. The only other variation is this little plate. It says you've got an ammunition box. It sits in that little groove there. Because I'm not having any guns on this, obviously just put the plate on, not the ammunition box. So yeah, I'm happy with that. So yeah, everything's sort of going together, everything's fitting well. I just need to catch up with this painting bit. So once that's done, we can be back in and carry on with the build. So I'll be back soon, and we'll leave it there for now. And next time you see it, the turret should be assembled and painted. Okay, so it's back to little Ferret Scout car. I made the turret up, and again it was just bronze green inside, and then as with the seats I've just gone over with a bit of rubber black out of the pen and dry brushed a grey on it so they stand out a little bit. Then I realised that what I thought was the back of the turret is actually a hatch. I've still got a few more bits to go, so that sits on something. Oh, sits on something like that. This hatch flops open here, and then there's a back bit which I've still got to paint. That's not a problem. But when I was doing that, if you pop the turret on, this top plate you glue on, which I don't know the part number off the top of my head, I can find out if you're interested, has got a slight gap all the way around it, which looked a bit unsightly, so I filled it all with the Mr. Putty White, and then I'm just going over with a needle file and just gently stroking it till I get a flat surface right across, so you can see where the putty's filled it in, and there's no major gaps there. This side still needs a bit of work, I'm trying to go right across the top so I don't file at an angle, so it's only taking the putty off, which is quite soft, so it's coming off easier than the surrounding, so you end up with a perfectly flat top to it. Now, I've subsequently looked at photos, and there's a whole series about these things on the Tank Museum website. So in the UK, that's the Tank Museum in Bovington, and there is a seam. This would appear to be a plate that's bolted on to the original Mark 1 chassis to allow a turret to go on, and there is a seam line around there, but I think it's partly due to the way I fitted it, and partly as a fluke of the way this is built, because this is built with individual panels that pop on. These don't, well, they do line up exactly if you take more time than I did, I guess, but because they're not lining up with millimetre precision, you're getting slightly different gaps, and because of that, the gap I was getting around the top was different. You can see it's way wider there than it ever was there. So on reflection, I think you're better off doing what I've done, unless you've got a perfect gap all the way around. You take a bit more time sorting this out and filling that and pretending the seam's not there, because it's not going to alter the silhouette of the vehicle, but it does stand out and looks like a mismatch. And also it's bolted on the original, so if you wanted it to look half decent, you'd probably have to put bolt heads on it as well. So all things considered, I think getting rid of that seam is probably a better prospect than having the seam there. And when you've got the turret on, if you don't intend to have the turret at an angle, you really only need to concentrate on this back quarter there. The front bit doesn't matter too much. So I think we've just about done that, so we can move on. I won't paint it with the turret on, obviously I'll shove a bit of something in that hole just to tidy it up. But yeah, I think we've got to a point where we've eradicated an ugly seam line and we can move on with the build. So, and that is really the only bit of filler I've had to put in this kit so far. I think I'll need to put little bits in these joint lines down here when there's a bit of primer on it, but nothing major. It will be just that water soluble stuff, and I wouldn't say this is a bad fit. It's just I did it on camera, so I wasn't looking that closely where I was going, and I hadn't looked ahead in the instructions. Had I spent a bit more time test fitting, I would have realised this was all part of it, and I would have, there's still a bit of a gap there, I would have spent a bit more time trying to sort this out. So because there's still a gap there and filled my thumbnail, that'll stand out under primer. Is it an area you're going to see? No, actually I'll leave that. That one will probably get away with. We'll see when the prime's on. I am envisaging having to revisit some of this just to tidy up, so I can do that then when this has got a coat of primer. Where's my polishing stick? If we polish it a bit, we'll see more of what's gone on. It's looking pretty flat actually. So that's where we are with that one. Now I've got that done, I can finish off the turret, then we can start to put the side skirts and suspension on it, then it'll be ready for its coat of paint. So thanks for watching, and I'll be back soonish. Okay, so back to the little ferret. So I've started to do the next stage. Everything around the top there I've got blended in well enough. I think with coat of primer will show any defects and we can deal with it then. So next is getting the suspension on this, and the only thing you need to be a bit careful of is these little lugs here. So they've got a little bit more detail on this side than they have on the inner face, so that the little lumps go upwards and the detail goes on the outside. So on this side of the car it's C7 here and here at the front of the suspension, and C6 here and here at the rear of it. When you go on this side, to keep the detail on the outside, it's C6 on the front and C7 on the rear. I don't think it's going to make a great deal of difference. If you get that wrong, you're not really going to see that detail or anything, but it's just worth bearing that in mind when you're putting them on, that you have to hand them. So all I did was got a big heap of 6s there, a big heap of 7s there, and put them on one by one so I didn't get confused. The rest of it, these little drive shafts, they all clip together quite nicely. There's bits of flash on it, but again, I don't know how much that you're going to glue on the mould seams. I don't know how much of that you're actually going to see when it's in place, because the wheels and the mudguard's going to cover a lot of it, and I'm never that fussed by the underside of the vehicle, so I've done a bit of an effort to clean them up where I've glued them together, but I haven't gone crazy on that. I don't even want to notice. The only thing about that is the ones on the front have this little lug on it, and the ones on the rear, you take that little lug off. I'm going to do that when I've glued them on, because these are staggered as well, so they probably only fit in one place. If you look at that little, that's one type. That's the same as, so maybe they're not, there's a bend in them, so they probably only fit on one side, so I'm going to have to be a bit careful with that. So I don't want to cut anything off and find out I've cut the wrong piece off. Yeah, these will be the opposite to it, these will go the other way, won't they? So yeah, there's two types of those. I haven't labelled them when I've done them, so care when assembling on that. And the other bit I had to tidy up is the springs have got a little mould seam. You can just see evidence of it there, where that one has been done properly. Not much, and if you try to scrape it clean, you cause more harm than good. So what I've done is got some extra thin and just brush it over the mould seam, and keep brushing, and eventually the plastic will go sticky and it'll eat that seam out, and you'll feel it start to drag. Still going, still eating it, but it eats it evenly so that you still keep the definition of the spring where it is. And now it's starting to pull now, starting to mark the plastic where it's just dragging. When you get to that point, wet the brush again, just give it one pass to smooth over the plastic, and then that mould seam will go and you won't lose any shape. So the next thing now is to put these fellas together and see what it looks like, balance the wheels on and see how we're looking. So I'll be back in a minute when that's done. Okay, so it looks like the suspension is relatively foolproof. You've got a spring you glue into this wishbone, drive shaft goes in, and there's a rear wishbone, and it's all, these springs have all been cleaned, haven't they? It's all sort of keyed. There's a flat spot there on this springs that fits in the bottom wishbone, which is detailed on both sides. It doesn't matter which way up you have it. So that'll clip into there quite snugly. That drops into the chassis. So simple it was on the back. Oh yeah, it is. That plugs into the chassis there. And I don't think anything here dictates the height of the wheels, but we'll check in a minute. That's a bit lower than I would like. It was simpler on the other one. Let's just give it a wiggle. Get it properly bedded in. Yeah, okay. That was a me not it sort of thing. So that'll drop in there. You've got a drive shaft that only fits in one way. So let's clip this bit off. We don't need that. Can you see the bottom lug? The rest doesn't matter. Now with this, again, there's a flat spot on here, so it can only fit in one way. We know that pin has to face forward, so that's the wrong one for this side. I'll show you how I know in a minute. So if that, yeah, that's the one for this side, and I know that sorry, just get a quick tidy up. I know which bits are seen now, so I know which bits I want to do. A bit rough and ready. Yep, if you look at this, one of these little pins is longer than the other pin. So you want the longer one fitting up, and you can't get it wrong, because if you look at the two wishbones, the top one, which is the one we just fitted in, slots nicely into that. And it's not a problem. This bottom one is ever so slightly wider, so it can't, the wishbone won't fit in. So you know it's the long one to the top. You know it's that little pin to the front. So we know we can drop this into here now. This is all loose fitted at the moment, obviously. That'll sit snugly in there. That fits in there. Then the bottom wishbone, which is the one without the big hole in it, just drops into place there. Then we can deburr it with a glue to a certain degree. Now the thing, I'll just glue this on, then I'll tell you what I don't like. It's all positively located, so you don't have to have mountains of glue around it to melt it in. It's only to hold it that back into its little slot there. This wishbone there and there. Tidy that a little bit. There's two things I don't like. One is, I don't know if that wheel height's accurately set by the position of that drive shaft. It all depends how you line that wishbone up, I think. So that's a bit dubious. And also, if you look at the wheels there, they just sit on those bosses there, and they're terribly wibbly wobbly. So I think when you come to put the wheels on, it would be sensible to use this Revel contactor and make a little jig to get the wheels vertical, and even if it's only a couple of sanding sticks down each side, to make sure that they're not twisted in any way, although a bit of a twist in the front ones as though it's steering might be quite good, but you'd have to have it so that it's set up like that to make sure you haven't got any sort of weird angle on it. In a minute I'll glue the other sides on off camera. Then balance the wheels onto it and then put a weight on it and make sure it sets with the wheels all on the ground. I think that's the only thing you can do for now. Then when it's all set like that, whip the wheels off, and there's a bit of jiggling those later on when we come to put them on, because it has got a bit of play, including a little bit of slight bit of up and down play. We can put some contactor on it, set them all straight, drop them down, but those will have to be painted. So when I'm painting it, I'll put a bit of blue tack inside there, and I'll put a bit of mascot or something on here, so when we are gluing on, we're getting a plastic to plastic joint, and we won't have any paint interfering with it to get a stronger bond. But I'll just get the rest of the suspension on and then we'll call it a night. Okay, so that's the suspension all on. think it was this side. On one side I did have a little bit of a, it's that one, she's a bit of a twist in the strut, but because that's under the mud guards, I don't think you're going to see it. There's something funny about that, to the extent where I went back through the instructions and just checked that, where are we? I don't know where the parts are now. I just had to check that these wishbones were common parts. Yeah, the C19 and the C8, because I just couldn't get one of those shock absorbers to fit in there. I think it's just been a mismolded part, but it says 4 of them, so they are all identical. So that was that. So it glued on. The wheels aren't glued on, despite appearances. All I've done is got some clamps, squeeze them against the suspension. I might distort it a bit, but I'm not too bothered. It seems relatively solid, he says, with an yeah, it must be solid enough to take that. We're saying it's solid. There's no distortion on this spring, so we're saying that's good. But the main reason for that is I wanted to check all 4 wheels were on the ground. I don't care about them that way at the moment. I just want to know they're all on the ground. And then just to check, because I can't see around the far side, rather than disturb it, I've just got a bit of paper and just slid it under each wheel. And if it won't go through, we know it's as close as a piece of paper to the ground. And the experience I had with those wheels before is you had probably 0.5 millimeter jiggle on those, so it's under the thickness of that paper. So when we come to glue them on properly, I'll get something like those, which are a 90-degree angle, hold it against the wheel and glue 2 on with those, hold them in place to make sure they're all square, then glue the back 2 on. So we'll do it stage by stage, but that'll be a bit later down the line. Everything will need painting before then, or does it? Because of the alignment, potential alignment problem, I'm probably going to do this out of order. I'll go through and explain next time I see it. I think what I'm going to end up doing is leaping ahead and putting all these little bits and pieces on these little lifting eyes and anything that needs to go on that lower hull. Then we can spray the bottom half of it bronze green, paint the wheels up, put the wheels on, then put the mud. I don't know, I'll think about it. I'm tempted to put the wheels on, then the mud guards, but then you're spraying 2 different areas at different times. Then you've got a lot of masking problems around the wheels because you've still got all these guards to go on. We'll have to see about that. But the main thing is the suspension's on, it's sitting straight. I've got to put 2 little steering arms in the front, but I don't want to do that till everything's set up. Then it will just be throwing the guards onto her, mud guards, and any tools, and giving it an overall coat of paint. I'll call it a night there, and we'll come back and decide whether to put the wheels on at the end. I just don't think with the guards on I can get anything at 90 degrees to hold the wheels in place. Okay, it's back to the little Ferret Scout car. Since you've last seen it, I've glued on these storage bins and the wings or fenders. Moving my hands really too fast. The suspension's fitted, and the bit you didn't see is these little tie rods have gone onto the suspension. They just clip onto that little bracket there and rest on top of that hub. And if you remember, those little lugs on the back you had to cut off, so I cut them off last minute so I didn't get confused, which happens. Spare wheel holder's gone. But the main thing to take on board with it all is it's all fitted pretty much gap free, and surprisingly well. The marks there are bits of glue which we'll sand off before we do it. And judging by the high, not only did I think there's going to be any major problems, so I think what I'll do now is throw the rest of it together quite quickly, and you won't see it again until it's finished, or if there's a fit problem with any of the parts that go on, but I don't think there will be. Then I'll give it a squirt of primer, and I'm going to use the hatches for all the masks there, by the way. So we'll give it a squirt of primer. Once the primer's on, we can check all these gaps and see if any of them need addressing. I think there's one or two where there's going to be little hairline marks in there when the primer's on it, but nothing major. So if that's the case, we can use this Vallejo filler. It's a water-based filler which you haven't seen me use before, but it's quite nice, things like that. Then give it, if that's all done, reprime, give it a coat of paint, assemble it. Then we can look at weathering, dry brushing, and putting a bit of detail on. But all in all, the way it's going together at the moment, it's a bit of a dream of a kit, if I'm being honest. So I'll disappear now, and unless there's any major faults on the last few bits that are going on, which I don't think there will be, you'll see it again in primer. So that's it for now, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, it'll be the last little part of the little ferret armoured car now. So I think what I'm going to do is get this everything in primer ready for the colour, then do a separate video to paint the colour on it, and do a bit of light weathering, that sort of thing, paint chipping. So that'll be quite a short video. This one will end with this all together, or is it together it's going to be with the painting. I've got the little turret ready for a coat of primer. Hatches are, that's already painted on the inside, so I'll put that in loose, and when we flip that up, there'll be a couple of green lines there, but we can just brush paint them in quick just to hide that. So that'll be primed in a minute. The main jerry can I've glued on because that's a diesel one, that's going to be green. This water one is a black plastic, so I'm going to paint that up separately and stick it on when this is all painted green, so I don't have any tricky masking jobs. So to paint it, I've just drilled a hole in the back of it there where the where it sits on the vehicle, so you'll never see it. Chuck a cocktail stick in that. But it's not a criticism of Airfix, but where this is has been moulded, you've got a bit of a detent there and a bit of a seam line. It was the same on the fuel one. So to get rid of that, all I've done is put in a little bit of super glue. To fill that well up. Hold it right till I get the kicker. I should have been prepared. Quick, quiet square of kicker to get that to go off. Still going to be way too low, but we're going to do this in stages. So another little blob of super glue. That's probably close to what we're doing now, actually. Quick square of kicker before it runs down the side, because it probably run down the good side now, my look. That'll be enough to get that to set. And then I'm going to leave that till it's properly hardened. Get this out of the way. Then attack that with the needle file, and then it'll still be a bit lumpy and bumpy there. So once it's flattened with a needle file, another coat of super glue, another coat of kicker, and gradually fill it. That's probably hard enough to file now, so we can see what we're doing. With the kicker, it doesn't take that long. And you can see there's 1 or 2 areas there where it hasn't quite filled it yet. So we'll go in again, another layer of this over the top. Get the kicker ready. And this will look a bit blurred now, but it's these little bits that will make a difference when you see it overall. So I'll leave that to set. You've seen what I'm doing, so I won't do that on camera again. That's just, that'll harden, we'll file it down, job done. And now it's me Vallejo putty, which I bought especially for this job, but I've subsequently used on another one that's in the background there. But all in all, the hatches, the body panels fit quite well. These areas where it's a bit green, they were slightly overhanging, so I've just gone with a knife and gently scraped that back so you don't get any lips on it. And this isn't a criticism of an Airfix kit, to be honest. That the fit on this is exceptional, considering so many panels. But areas where we have got little gaps, so there's one here, and this is why I primed it before I filled it, so I couldn't use my normal Mr. Surfacer method. You need the light grey to actually show up any cracks in the primer. So I'll just get the excess off this back one while it's still wet, because we only need to fill that little crack. We want to, because there's natural joints on it anyway. Because there's natural joints on it anyway, you don't want to go too wild with this. You just want to get it so you don't get that black line of hole. In fact, on this, because it's a weld seam anyway, I might not need to do anything once it's dry. That might be enough. This gap down here looks a little bit large, so we can just might as well run it up there while we're doing it where that plate joins. That's all looking quite nice, but we'll just for consistency run that up there, and again almost instantly that can come off in this case, because we don't want it to build up high, we just want it to fill a gap. If we wanted it to build up to fill a gap, then we couldn't go this quickly. So that's done. So that done, everything else seems okay. Don't think there's any major problems anywhere else. That little box is going to be red, so the fact there's a little gap there won't really matter. A bit of filler there we want to get off. Don't want too much of this stuff on there. I'm not sure, that gap looking down there looks a bit large, and for the sake of what we're doing, just whack that in. New cotton bud. There's no longer a gap there, so let's solve that issue. That's it then. And the only other area of concern, I want you to check those sand channels. No, the sand channels are potentially got a bit of a gap there actually. So potentially there. Once you start doing this, you start to see gaps everywhere, but we're not going to kill it. So the whole thing's a pretty agricultural vehicle. It's not got the body panels of a Rolls Royce or anything. So get the excess off that one. Make sure get it out of the holes before it hardens. Not that you can't get out later, it's just why struggle. Be fine. Some of the dark paint, that'll be good. Then the only other area of concern is I've got a little bit of a lip here and a bit of a visible seam down there. When the turret's on, yeah, it's not a toy. I'm not going to be spinning the turret round left, right and centre. The only really big gap you can see is this one here. We'll gently tease something into the other side as well. So let's get this off. I'm going to have to build it up with super glue. I think that layer is a bit soft for it. So we're going to do that. Root round for a cocktail stick, of which we've gone through quite a lot lately. Just gently build up this area so we get a little bit of ridge of super glue there. And as soon as it's on, I don't know if this kicker will affect the paint. I don't think it will, but I won't touch it till it's gone off. Why, it's still got the kicker on it, actually, that'll help that. So that should solve that blob there. And we run a little bit into that crack there. A little bit into there. Give it a blast. And while that's going off, that bit there is solidified. Hope that's on camera. Hands quite high up. So it just needs a little touch in there. There's a little shiny bit there. Kick that. By now, that should be relatively solid. So we can get our needle file and just gently attack this, don't go wild. And keep it as flat as possible. So that's eliminated that little bit of a seam we had there and around there. It looks bad now, but that's because the super glue is in the seam. So once we fold it flat, you'll obviously still see the grey line. That's protected by the super glue. We get this little fella one last time. Stick out for now. So I'm right off camera for a lot of this. So that's done. So those little white bits are just subsurface. That's glassy smooth there now. So the little ferret is ready for a second prime. So I was always going to prime the turret because it hasn't been done yet, so that was on my list. And I primed one side of these hatches. Now I need to do this side, so that was on the list for tonight. Jerry can prime before it's sprayed black. Now I don't necessarily need to re-prime this. It's sorry, I got distracted. With the green, that's going to cover that adequately, and it'll probably grip on it well enough. But just to make doubly sure, while the primer's out, I might as well give that a little squirt around there just to make sure I have made good that repair. Then I've still got time to do that final last little tweak if I have to. All these bits stuck to my board where I use that Velo primer, I'm not going to touch them again. I think they're good enough. Sometimes you have to go in afterwards. Sometimes you don't, but I think with the paint that'll probably cover everything. So there's very little, considering how this is made of a load of multifaceted panels, there's very little fillings needed to bring this up to scratch. And I think a lot of that filling, why is that rocking? Don't worry about it, it's not on the wheels yet. I think a lot of that filling, oh, it's standing on a bit of plastic, that's why. A lot of that filling was down to me rushing through it rather than making sure these panels fitted perfectly. So I don't think there's any huge problems. This is a kit, it will just go together straight from the box. But I'll get it primed, I'll hold the wheels on with blue tack so you can see what it all looks like, and we'll look at the overall model. Then I'll call that one a day on this, and then I'll start to paint it green and put a few streaks and weathering bits on. But with the holiday season fast approaching, that could well be a couple of weeks before you see the part 2 of this. But priming, then an early night for me, so I'll be back soon with the finished product primed and ready for paint. At the moment it's looking a bit wonky on the wheels because they're held on with blue tack rather than being glued on. Same paint the tyres, but I just wanted to put it together just to see how it looked and to get an idea. So I shall try and tip it up and down, but I've got a feeling things will fall off, but just so you get an idea of what you get. So yeah, I think it looks relatively smart and detailed. There's enough going on there to catch your eye. It's quite chunky, looks quite nice. So yeah, I'm pleased I built it. and in a minute I'll put some stills up at the end so you can see it from all angles. So I'll end this video at this point, and then painting, decaling and a light weathering will be another video, and I might see if I can get sorry, it's this heat that's making me cough. I might see if it can get the camera into the spray booth so you can see the green going onto it at least, but that's where we are with that. I'm going to switch this off, go and get out the heat. It's like an oven in here, and probably a week or two after you see this, the painting video will be up and running. So I don't think it's going to be cool enough to paint it over the next few days. It's threatening to be 38 degrees tomorrow. Then we've got things going on over the weekend, so I think it'll be nearer 2 weeks, 3 weeks before you see this, the next stage. Yes, but you will, and hopefully you'll like it. So thanks for watching. I'll switch off now, and I'll be back with part 2 soon.